Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Financial Services in the Age of AI, Keys to Securing AI Agents, Building Trust, and Managing Customer Identity. We're excited that you could join us. My name is Laura Beth, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, we are going to deep dive on how customer identity provides a secure and accessible foundation for AI in financial services. Before we get started, let's go through some quick tips to make sure your webinar experience is the best it can be. Now, at the bottom of your screen are resizable and movable application widgets. Feel free to move them around to make the most of your desktop space. The slides will advance automatically during the presentation. If you need to enlarge them, simply click the Enlarge Slides button in the top right corner of the presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click the Help widget in the bottom left corner at any time. Now, as the presentation gets underway, you may submit questions using the Q&A widget. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If a more informative answer is needed or we just run out of time before we answer your question, we will follow up via email, so you are welcome to submit those as you think of them. Then, after today's presentation, you will receive a link with on-demand access to the webinar so you can watch it again at any time, as well as share the content with colleagues. All right, we are thrilled to be joined by our speakers today. We have David Januchowski, Principal Strategic Advisor at Okta, and Jim Perry, Senior Strategist at Market Insights. So to kick it off, I'm going to ask each of our speakers to provide a quick introduction of themselves and their work. So Jim, let's start with you.
Excellent. Thanks, Laura Beth. As you said, I'm Jim Perry, Senior Strategist with Market Insights. Our company, for about 30 years, has helped community banks and credit unions across the country make really smart decisions about growth, relevance, and oftentimes about innovation. You know, lately, a lot of my work has revolved around AI, not just how to use it, but how to use it safely. You know, my role is to help bridge the gap between strategy and technology. It's kind of simple. These days, it's all about helping institutions build trust with their customers and modernize their operations. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Glad to have you here, Jim. David, welcome as well.
Hello. My name is David Januchowski. You can call me DJ. I'm a Principal Strategic Advisor at Okta, on a leading vendor-neutral identity company that frees everyone to safely use any technology. As a strategic advisor at Okta, I guide financial institutions on leveraging an identity fabric to meet industry-specific challenges like regulatory compliance, enhanced security, and seamless customer experiences based upon my 30 years of industry experience, what other FIs are doing in the industry, as well as trends that will help enable FIs to achieve their goals. Super excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's get right to it here. You know, to start, I want to think about some of the common applications for AI, and specifically generative AI in financial services. What are some of the most popular customer-facing applications of Gen AI, and what impact are they having? Jim?
Laura Beth, that's a great question. You know, in banking, we've traditionally viewed identity through the lens of compliance and risk. But identity is also the foundation for customer trust and for digital growth. You know, I really think the first wave of customer-facing AI in banking, you know, chatbots, onboarding tools, marketing, really gave bankers a sense of efficiency that's achieved through automation, but not the kinds of customer-facing personalization that creates those wow moments. I think the thing we need to remind ourselves is customers are already living with agentic AI tools, not in banking necessarily, but in other retail experiences. Those kind of systems that actually anticipate needs and act on behalf of users. So, but a lot of community-based institutions like the ones we work with are still in that exploration mode rather than implementation mode. I think we have an opportunity now to move from just talking about AI to actually training AI to create secure, personalized experiences that are going to reflect that kind of same familiarity with customers that they expect when they walk into a branch. I mean, that's the kind of mind shift that we're really navigating these days.
Yeah, Jim, you know, those are some really great points. And I like you kind of tied on that thread about sort of the different experiences from digital to inside the branch, you know, and one thing that as working in the industry for a while, and I'm working for an identity company that is really pushing forward on securing AI and what that means. Many banks are a little bit slower to sort of adopt some of AI, right? From either if it's the workforce or from the customer side, because of some of the security concerns. And I've always been a proponent of that. Banks' biggest core competency is really managing risk, and as they're thinking about AI, they're thinking about how to bring it in, but at the same time also how to secure that and minimize risk. And when I've been speaking to other customers about AI and things like that, many people still refer to AI potentially as like what machine learning is, so early iterations, right?
Right.
But what we've started to see in the industry, some have started to build out chatbots, kind of the first entry into that, being able to do things with like OpenAI AI or Gemini behind, leveraging sort of those natural language models, which allow more of that free speaking, interpretive results versus very specific prompts that might be like, can I check my balance, things of that nature. So what we're starting to see is that FIs are starting to go down that route. They're looking at how to enhance the experience, if that's from a retail experience, if that's looking at giving trading advice, if you're, a trading platform. And it's also starting to look at how to identify patterns and improve some of the operational things within the workforce themselves to make certain tasks like reconciliation and other tasks easier. So we see a combination out there of both what we see on the customer side as well as what we might see within the actual workforce of the banking.
Yeah, and David, bringing up identity security concerns, what risk of that nature are coming with these AI opportunities?
Sure. So when we talk about identity and security, some organizations and fintechs do better than others, right? But in many cases, there is constant attack of impersonations, account takeovers, and so on. FIs don't always do the best job of validating who is on the other side, right? Knowing the device, the person, and this isn't new. AI and specifically agentic AI is accelerating this challenge. And who is asking for something particular? And on the other end, is AI actually authorized to do the activity or see information and make that transaction, right? If that's moving money, changing an address. Security is at the forefront, right? To the need to ensure a lot of different protocols are in place, such as so that tokens can't be stolen. It all starts with identity, and some things that have gone rogue in the news, such as like Zelle or P2P, stem from organizations not adequately doing things like identity proofing and verifying, for instance, who's on the other end. When it comes to AI, voice and face deepfakes are at risk. AI is now another tool in the bad actors toolbox, and we need to be ensuring that we can manage that and accelerate as we go towards new technologies like passkeys and passwordless to be able to help manage this risk. Jim, I'd be interested in what you've kind of been seeing as well.
That's you offered up some great content there because I think it's all moving so quickly, right? I actually heard another David Birch, once say that most payment problems are identity problems. That is now truer than ever before. And for every scam that comes up, we're also trying to create new guardrails. Those deep fake scams that you talk about where they use cloned voices and synthetic identities, they're already costing customers hundreds of millions of dollars each year. And when that happens, customers are often going to blame the bank or the credit union, not necessarily the fraudster. So I think it's important to say that for community-based institutions, this isn't just a technical risk, it's a reputational one. Identity has to evolve from just that login process to an overall trust strategy, something that's going to protect both the customer and the institution. Because the whole idea of intelligent automation requires intelligent identity. You can't secure AI unless you secure identity across every channel and across every interaction.
Yeah, Jim, that makes a lot of sense with the community banks and smaller credit unions and others, right? Not everyone is a top 5 bank, right, and can just invest unlimited resources. It's important to find the right partners to help secure this end to end. And when I first started kind of doing identity, it was about databases, user ID and passwords, right? Maybe a one-time passcode or a security question. But since I've been at Okta over the last 4 years, things have accelerated at a rapid pace, both from how to secure experiences as well as the type of attacks that we're seeing. And again, back to a statement I made earlier, is that for many financial institutions, identity, isn't necessarily a core competency, right? It's hard. There's a lot of moving parts, and you really need to get in front of these bad actors and find partners that can help you mitigate these increased risks that are going forward.
Yeah, great points to bring up by both of you. And how does the right identity partner provide a secure foundation for Gen AI in financial services? Jim?
Well, I think it's important to say that identity is the connecting thread that runs through technology, through data, and the trust that exists with any institution, because it's really what allows AI systems to personalize without overstepping and to automate without violating that customer consent or the institutional consent. You have to ask, is your bot talking to a person? Is it talking to another bot? Without a modern identity framework, your systems aren't going to be able to tell whether they're interacting with an account holder or a joint account holder, somebody in their family, or a fraudster. You have to have that in place before any kind of customer-facing solution is going to really help you and your customer.
Yeah, SIAM solutions really have evolved, but SIAM always starts with identity and being to know who's on the other end. And pulling from kind of my previous experience when I was working on this wealth solution where somebody could essentially log in and provide their wire instructions to transfer some money, it started with, well, let's just set them up for MFA. But if you don't know who's on the other end, putting technologies and solutions like MFA in place don't necessarily help you avoid the bad actor, right? You really need to know who's on the other side. And really, SIAM is really about multiple layers, including identity proofing, government issued IDs, things like that, verifiable credentials, and the ability to sort of continually monitoring before, during, and after logon, right? It's become highly complicated, and to kind of ensure that connected thread, as Jim mentioned, is really important.
Without that in place, David, I really think a lot of the value of generative AI these days, it begins to break down because identity really has to be the foundation for a lot of the value that a lot of generative AI use cases actually offer to the industry. Because it's not just about security, it's about context.
Yeah, and Jim, speaking of context, you've both mentioned the importance of making sure AI agents can only access information that they and their specific users are permitted to use. So how specifically, do they do that, David?
Yeah, so a lot of this starts with, you might hear the term fine-grained authorization or entitlements management. It's really important that that is part of your overall solution, which essentially boils down to making sure that for the activity happening, that the right identity, and that can be human or non-human, so those could be your AI agents, have the right access, and that you've defined them well so that under any condition, the person or the non-human identity is getting the precise access to what they need and actually are authorized to do. And I think with the rise of the agents, one of the things that is becoming more prevalent is these agents are crafty. They're trying to be helpful throughout the process and trying to bring back more relevant information. The challenge is if that information or data points are not secure and the actual agents aren't authorized to do it, you could be actually providing information that should not be seen by others.
I think, David, that so many bankers that I know, they've been kind of trained to think about authentication, but not necessarily about authorization. Every community bank and credit union prides itself on how well it knows its customers. But the next leap forward has to be learning how to translate that kind of deep personal understanding into digital space. And I think that's where that authorization that you're talking about really comes in, making sure that every AI-driven action, whether it's summarizing a customer file or analyzing a transaction, is backed by the right permissions and the right context. A lot of smaller institutions often compete on that relationship strength. But the identity controls would allow them to compete digitally too, delivering that same level of trust and personalization at scale. I think we often hear the words high touch and high tech, but this kind of authorization actually helps make that possible.
Yeah, and what about ensuring AI agents can work autonomously but still seek user consent for sensitive or critical actions? How do financial institutions do that?
Sure. So there's something called human in the loop. And where that comes in is that there's a standard out there as part of the ID Foundation group called FAPI, which is financial grade APIs, and something called CIBA, which is client initiated backchannel authentication. I get it. More acronyms and terms, but what that allows is a secure client, like a backend application. Picture if you're using mobile banking or something like that, to send a request for authorization, like a push notification that you might see on your phone, to the end user, asking them for consent to verify the activity. So not just saying you're online and you're doing something, but very specific about what that activity is, and it ensures that any sensitive activity is approved by the person who intended it to happen, and that you actually have the right person on the other end.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what you're seeing as well out there.
No, that's so important, because I'm also glad you raised that phrase, human in the loop, because I've been at conferences lately where I think we have to begin to challenge ourselves to not let that phrase, human in the loop, become some vague slogan to make systems sound safe or ethical. When we talk about AI, consent is that new currency of trust. And the standards that you talk about create those consent guardrails so that actions for authorizing payments or account changes that require explicit permissions are given when they're needed. I think a lot of bankers believe that some of what we're talking about here is about slowing AI down from it getting too big, taking over too much of the industry, et cetera. It's making sure that autonomy that's created to keep operations efficient is always going to run inside the boundaries of trust that you want to maintain with your customer. So that, to me, is what that humans in the loop is really about.
Yeah, and maintaining trust is a good point, especially for those looking to expand their AI use. So how does having unified authentication strategies help financial institutions? They want to scale their innovation with generative AI. How do they do that, Jim?
Wow. Okay. This is where the disclaimer comes in. I'm a strategist. I'm not a technician. I'm not a programmer. I'm not an engineer. But from a strategy standpoint, unified authentication, I think, has so many ways it could be transformative for the industry. These kind of strategies create a single, secure, and auditable identity layer for both humans and AI agents. When a customer can be recognized everywhere they interact with a bank, instead of having separate logins or verification codes, you also unify fraud detection, KYC, risk management, all those access controls. When authentication is unified, banks, credit unions can confidently expand whatever AI-driven services they want to provide. Whether we're talking about autonomous agents, automated underwriting, real-time customer support, whatever it happens to be, it's without having to reinvent their security framework for each new use case. In my mind, that's not just good security, it's good business, because you have to have the right structure in place to make that happen. And I have to say that really requires a mindset shift, not just for your IT or compliance teams, but across the entire organization. I think a lot of today's AI risks come from misunderstanding. Employees using public tools for sensitive tasks, or trusting the output that AI gives them without any kind of verification. That's why I think a lot of forward-looking banks are investing in internal AI education, not to turn everyone into data scientists, but to give every employee the foundational skills, the vocabulary, the awareness to use these tools safely and strategically. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this technology can only move as fast as the people who use it wisely.
Those are some really great points,
Mhm.
Jim. And as you kind of were mentioning a little bit about the different logons, right? There's within a financial institution, there are different lines of business. If that's your commercial
Yep.
team, your consumer team, your small business, wealth teams, and many of them, even when it comes to security and identity, are doing their own things, especially around AI, right? In many instances, and the unification of those capabilities within a SIAM framework is really important. And it helps FIs manage AI controls and leverage AI in a way that is consistent across the board. FIs, and when I say FIs, financial institutions need to provide both high-level security and superior customer experience, both internal and external. And those things aren't mutually exclusive, and they can actually be brought together with a unified platform.
Yeah, great points from both of you on that, and just things that our audience needs to hear. And I want to know, why is Auth0 from Okta the right solution for that, David?
Sure. So Auth0 is a complete SIAM solution, right? It secures agentic AI applications by treating the agents as a new class of non-human identities, or NHIs, that require robust, dynamic, and granular access, back to that fine-grained access we talked about. The approach is really fully encapsulated with the Auth0 platform. Within Auth0 agent, to address the unique challenges. A couple areas that it really focuses on is the authentication, the authorization, and auditability, right? Knowing what did what, where, and when, and being able to prove what identity did that. And when we talk about some of those fine-grained authorization and RAG models, human in a loop, asynchronous, it's really important to have a platform that can provide all those capabilities. And as things are starting to continue to be enhanced and new things come on, you want to make sure that you have a partner that is focused in on that. And those things are showing up in things like cross app access and least privileged identity and continuous policy checking. So Auth0 is there to be that foundational component that really does allow financial institutions to really build a secure experience that meets and exceeds expectations and allows them to continue to keep pace with others out there.
Wow, this is so exciting to hear about and to talk about, because I think banks and credit unions really need infrastructure that's not only going to let them serve their customers, but also allows them to innovate safely. It seems to me that Auth0 provides that kind of foundation because it unifies identity and access in a way that adapts to technology. I often quote futurist Amy Webb. She essentially said that the wave of innovation ahead of us is so intense, it's going to reshape how we live and how we work. That wave is already hitting financial services. The institutions that thrive are going to be the ones with systems that can flex, where stability and agility coexist. I think with the right identity architecture, banks and credit unions can move faster, stay secure, and innovate with a level of confidence.
Excellent points there from both of you. And just thank you so much for this great discussion. I did want to shift to some questions from our audience today. And so let's jump right into these. This first question here is, what are some examples of AI use cases that call for human in the loop SIBA? So great question there. Who would like to take that one or start on it for us?
I can take that one.
That'd be great.
This is David. So one of the things that we're seeing coming up is some trading use cases where folks are using AI to potentially look at stock trading that meet a certain criteria, and that criteria can be based upon a certain value in the marketplace, as well as what that person has in assets that are in cash. But when the AI agents identify potential trade opportunities or investment opportunities, that's where the AI agent essentially uses that human in a loop, or with client initiated back channel authentication, SIBA, pushes a authorization request to the end user saying that you set up specific criteria, this has come up, would you like us to actually implement that trade? So they're looking for that human to provide the permission to actually execute a trade. So that's one area that I've seen come up talking to customers that they are in the process of building, and some are piloting at this time.
David, I'm curious. From what I understand, one of the new agentic kind of use cases here too is kind of that next level of call center identity verification. I understand that, again, these AI agents can actually authenticate callers by triggering that kind of push notification to the customer's mobile banking app, where they can verify using biometrics instead of answering security questions. This is obviously going to reduce phishing and social engineering risk. But I realize, again, that's a situation where you could eventually be seeing AI agents talking to AI agents.
Absolutely. That is actually a good one. And where we're starting to see that in a couple places is, for a while there was technology for to be able to do like a voice biometric. And with the rise of deep fakes and the ability to sort of essentially impersonate voices, like for instance, you and I are on this webinar today. Well, it's very easy for somebody to get our voices. And if they go ahead and set up that as an option, in addition to, like you mentioned, like security questions or sort of public facing information, that can actually be exploited. And one of the ways to help provide a better experience, but a more secure experience, is by using that kind of human in the loop and pushing that authorization to a known registered device in human to verify themselves as part of that call center strategy. So that's a great point. And we are seeing more of an uptick in that capability.
All right, great answer there. Thank you both for chiming on that one. Okay, I've got another one here. It says, how can organizations unify their strategies? So how can organizations unify their strategies?
Wow. One of the first things I always tell our clients is you've got to break it out of the silos. These are conversations that can't just be held in your IT department or in your compliance department. You have to make sure that organization-wide there are conversations about implementing these SIAM solutions, making sure that everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, that's a great point. At the end of the day, right, there's so much siloed, technology and processes and things like that. And again, that's, I think, just the nature of how, financial institutions, credit unions, banks have evolved, right? By bringing those together sort of in an enterprise solution like a SIAM solution, and find the right partner. And I stress on that word, partner versus vendor. There's tons of solutions out there that you can buy you can buy from a vendor, but you're really looking for a partner to help kind of grow and be an extension of your organization to help you really move through this journey. And it's important that if you can unify enterprise capabilities, and again, we're talking about SIAM and how to secure agentic AI, but that goes across the board, where you can start to build repetitive processes and use technologies across the board to help streamline your implementations, will vastly improve your operational productivity.
Excellent. All right, let's get another question in here. It says, what are the different types of data points a SIAM solution brings together to verify customer identities?
Oh gosh, I'm going to have to turn that one to David.
Thanks, Jim. I think I'll have some color here. And when you think about a SIAM solution, there are a lot of capabilities within that, from doing your authentication to MFA to, we talked about, fine-grained authorization. But there's also things out there like identity proofing, device validation, being able to validate and get a reputation score on a phone number that's being used when maybe you're signing up to open a new account, or an email address. A SIAM solution likely will give you that core, the ability to integrate with best of breed. And that's what Auth0 and Okta provide. We're not going to provide every solution out there. There are companies who focus very much on identity proofing or device biometrics, and user behavior. The important thing is to have a solution that allows you to bring all those together, because again, there are so many disparate pieces within a SIAM solution, and there are many, many companies out there that do it super, super well. And it's important for organizations to recognize that you want to be able to find those solutions that are best of breed, but you're also looking for a platform that allows you to integrate and bring those in seamlessly. And so that's really what a leading SIAM solution will bring to the table.
That's a great point, David. I'm glad you tackled that one.
I am as well. And that is all the time we actually have today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Jim and David, for a great discussion today. We appreciate, you sharing your insights and expertise with us. Very timely discussion. And I'd also just like to thank our audience for joining us today. Today's webinar will be available on demand. You will soon receive an email with a link so you can rewatch or share with your colleagues. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.